and Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com coming back at y'all today. Second video of today, at least for me, talking about Texas basketball parting ways with Chris Beard after the arrest and assault charges that he had in Travis County last month, January 5th, I believe, afternoon of. Matt Norlander of CBS Sports was first to report that Texas had fired Chris Beard with cause, which means Texas should be able to recoup the rest of his contract, the rest of his 5 years. I believe, Shane, you would mention that in one article you did today. All our coverage will link in the description below. But if I read something on the Austin American-Statesman right, there could be a little bit more that Texas recoups from that. I don't want to harp on that too long because it might end up being somewhere in the ballpark of like $250,000 to $1 million, and just that's not much for Texas sports in general. But it is interesting to see kind of how the whole process went down, and Texas putting out a letter to Chris Beard that was essentially his. That was the notification of him getting let go and the timing of the whole thing. But I mean, Tarik, you had mentioned it before that, it's interesting with the way they did it, why they didn't do this a few weeks ago already. But, it's what's done is done. And now we can move forward to look at what's next for the program, potential coaching candidates, and just the overall impact on this basketball program. Tarik, you haven't, I don't know if you joined us for a basketball video anytime recently here. So just in general, I'll pass it over to you, kind of some of your thoughts on it.
Well, I was really excited when we hired Chris Beard about a year and a half ago now. So it's disappointing that he won't be leading the program in the future, but it was the right decision. I think that they should have just immediately fired him when they knew when they suspended him without pay. You pretty much already knew that he wasn't coming back. So just go ahead and get it done. I would have been absolutely floored if he had come back to coach at Texas. But now, gratefully, that's all behind us. It looks like the team will do fine with Rodney Terry this year. We'll see how that plays out. And now we're back looking for another coach, which is kind of the story at Texas, always looking for another coach. You never just have a coach set in the big sports at Texas, it seems.
Except for baseball.
I think it's kind of interesting. I don't think anyone would have guessed, because Sark and Beard were hired at about the same time. I think within a couple months of each other, right? Is that right, Shane?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I don't think anyone would have thought that Beard would be fired before Sark. They would have thought Beard had been there a while, and Sark would be, if the most cynical part of you came out, Beard would maybe be there 5 to 6 years at worst, and Sark at worst would be 3 if things all fell apart, and Sark is still there and Beard's not. So that's an interesting turn of events. So all that being said, I think that Texas definitely needs to shoot for the stars when it comes to getting their next coach. Don't just promote from within. I think they need to look at what teams like LSU and USC did in football and kind of apply it to basketball. Joel Klatt said it beautifully when Lincoln Riley was hired at USC and Brian Kelly was hired at LSU. Everyone has a number. Everybody has a number. What is your number? Texas can get that number if they want to, and that's what they should do as we move into the SEC and as we kind of make more use of that beautiful building that's in your background, Andrew. So, Shane, what do you think?
Yeah, I think feel bad for all parties involved here. It's getting a little overlooked. This just sucks for the players. I mean, it's come out that they're rallying behind Rodney Terry. But I mean, in general, Chris Beard was the guy that they signed up to play basketball for. I mean, maybe not a few that came to Texas like Brock Cunningham before, but for the most part, Beard was the leader of this. The players who are trying, most of them, make a career out of basketball after college are going to have to deal with this adversity through the next couple months and kind of go from there and keep putting their best foot forward. But yeah, kind of crazy how in under 1 month, Beard went from having the number 2 program in the country at his dream job to being out of a job with no money to go with it. So super unfortunate circumstances and situation. But obviously this had to happen regardless. If he's never convicted, you can't have this stain over the program. There had been a kind of a dark cloud following his tenure. So I think right choice by CBC and Hartzell to kind of come to the conclusion to let him go. It is an interesting point that I haven't thought about. I guess, Tarik, you brought up why it took so long. I guess there had to be some sort of internal investigation done, but since it was announced on December 12th what happened with Beard, I don't think there was any situation in which he was going to stay. Like I said, convicted or not, it just really wasn't going to work. But it'll be.
And they did enough of a internal search that they could suspend him without pay. So usually, when things like this happen, usually you're suspended with pay. What I saw without pay, it's like, okay, this is all but done. He's not coming back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I think the immediate question for Texas fans becomes what happens in the next. Obviously, you want to look to who Texas may possibly hire, but when you have a top 10 team on your hands, it's what happens in the 2 to 3 months, because the talent is there for this team to reach a second weekend in March, first Final Four since 2003. But can Rodney Terry hold the ship together, and what's going to happen, which we'll obviously discuss. But I think it's super interesting from that perspective. And I think Terry has a great opportunity to go out and prove himself in what's looking like the deepest conference in recent college basketball memory. So I'm excited for the opportunity presented for Coach and the players, unfortunately, under these circumstances.
Yeah, Shane, you give me a good transition point here, but yeah, I mean, y'all both make really good points on this. That who knows what took place behind the scenes or what happened there, but just the fact of the matter is that this is a whole lot of pressure on a lot of these upperclassmen. It's unfortunate for a lot of the younger players that kind of committed to Chris Beard and were looking to get developed in this system. I talked about when I did the video earlier today, Dylan Mitchell. I think he's a primary example of a guy that was looking to come here, be maximized with his physical tools and defensive prowess and build his offensive game in a more structured system around what Chris Beard was building here. And his NBA draft stock's already been kind of falling significantly in the past month. And if you just look at mock drafts, and it makes sense if you're looking at the way he's been utilized. He hasn't taken a single 3-pointer on the season, but to a bigger level here and a more human level, some of these younger guys, some of the transfer portal additions, these guys bought into Beard and, riding a high, and just literally as soon as we got, it seemed like, to the top for the non-conference slate portion of the season, all this comes out. I will ask this, and then we can move more into like the immediate impact and recruiting and things like that. What do y'all think? And I'm removing the coach from the candidacy here. I'm not saying what do you want to see out of Rodney Terry for him as a candidate. That's a separate thing. Maybe you're feeling the same, but knowing that, Chris Beard is fired now and there's not that hanging over the program at this point, what do you want to see from Rodney Terry, and what are your realistic expectations moving forward this season?
Well, with Chris Beard, I thought they could have made Sweet 16, maybe Elite 8. I certainly do not want to see another defensive performance like what I saw against Kansas State. If you give up, was it 103 points?
No, we scored 103. We gave up 116.
I'm sorry. No, that's right. That's why. That's the 103 that's stuck in my head. 116 points. I hardly even see college basketball games of any sort get that high. So that can't happen. The team has been defensively regressing ever since Beard wasn't there. That's something I've been noticing. I was like, okay, at first it didn't look too bad. Then weeks go by and you notice like there's certain like adjustments Beard would make in the game, and they're not being made because neither Terry or any of the assistants are as good as Beard, which is why Beard was the head coach. Then, but that's got to get cleaned up. Obviously, we understand it's not going to be as good as when Chris Bader was there, but the defense has got to get better, and I need to see more urgency from the offense. I think there are times where Texas just feels like I was just watching that Kansas State game. The players kept looking to me like, okay, they're hot right now, but we're going to come back in the end and win. They can't do this all night. They have to have more of a sense of urgency. It's like, no, we need to stop this now before they get any hope. Because if something like this happens against like a smaller team, and by smaller I mean just not as maybe like not a Power 5 team that you're playing in the tournament, this can't absolutely happen again. You have to learn that lesson now. That's what I'm learning for, is more urgency of saying like, okay, this can get out of control if we don't snap out of it. So snap out of it. And obviously in defensive adjustments, that's what I want to see the rest of the way. The Big 12 is a gauntlet. It's the toughest conference in basketball. So you're going to stub your toe and skin your knee and maybe even bloody your nose a little bit in this conference. Just is what it is. But that shouldn't happen. If that had happened against Baylor, okay. Kansas, okay. Not Kansas State. You got to be better than that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you make, Tarik, because like you mentioned, the Big 12 is a gauntlet. There's, of the 18 games, 0 of that. Like there's no going in and, playing like a Minnesota or some team that you're going to roll. So I think this team and Coach Terry kind of has to all rally together, because if you don't, you're going to get caught with your pants at your knees and you're going to look up and you're going to be 2-6 in Big 12 play. Like that's very realistic, even for a team as talented as Texas. So I think the first thing for Terry is just, keep everyone's head on their shoulders, keep them, committed to the season, and let them know there's still a task at hand and goals that can be accomplished, very attainable goals. I thought it was interesting. I saw a tweet from Nick Moyle today, who covers the Longhorns for the Express News. He had a quote from Sir Jabari Rice. I'm not sure where the quote came from, but about Terry, this is what Rice said. He said, "He's a great dude. He's a defensive whiz. He's always been a fiery coach. He taught me a lot of things on defense. He's just a defensive genius and a great dude. Besides being a great coach, I like playing for Coach Terry." So obviously my immediate reaction is, is he a defensive whiz? Because we haven't seen that. Tarik mentioned it. All defensive numbers have gone up since the 6 games that he's taken over, points per game, shooting percentage, everything. And that's coming off a game where Kansas State scored the most amount of points in program history. So I'm confused by that point, and I'd like a little more context from that, because, stylistically, this Texas team is built to play good defense and win games in the 70s. And I think they need to refine that identity quickly before things spiral out of control. Because if you keep playing games that are getting up near triple digits, that's not a winning battle against teams like Kansas, teams like Baylor, teams like even TCU, who we saw last night, almost scored 90 and beat Baylor. So I think Terry needs to reestablish his team's identity. And I think we're going to learn a lot on Saturday against Oklahoma State.
That is true. I don't mean to harp on Rodney Terry too long. I mean, yeah, Shane, from what you're saying, I'll leave it at this. So Sir Jabari Rice's defensive rating in the last 2 games is at 127.2. That is horrific. So it's maybe there was something there before. It's not there right now. In terms of like Rodney Terry's defensive game planning or defensive prowess. We talked ad nauseum after the Kansas State game about all the issues. I am still feeling the same way I did before. It is like a lot of this stuff that was going wrong was like middle school level basketball fundamentals in terms of off ball and help defense. So But Tarik, I'll cap off this part here with and just a brief take from myself. But you had mentioned Texas not playing with a ton of urgency, and I think that is an important point because that Kansas State game was really the first time this season where Texas was playing from behind, especially to that degree. And I mean, you just have to look at that as a learning experience for them to be able to fight back. But you also have to look at it this way, that Texas needs to learn how to get some defensive stops when they're put under that sort of adversity in a conference that's so deep. And as much as we want to harp on Rodney Terry and the coaching staff, I mentioned this after the game too. There are too many senior leaders on this team for that sort of off-ball sleepiness to be happening. That was on the coaches and the players. Sometimes it's both. And that was one of those cases. I personally, the defense has to improve. I think that's the elephant in the room with Rodney Terry. But I would like to see the offense continue to move with more purpose. Shane, you and I talked about that a lot before Big 12 play began, that it seemed like, Marcus Carr, who has still been playing tremendous offensive basketball in the last, 6 or 8 games, like the best offensive basketball of his career. They've gotten a lot going with the dribble handoff game, with kind of the screen and roll, a lot more free-flowing off-ball movement on offense. You started to notice, too, a lot more catch-and-shoot opportunities from three. That's what really got Tyrese Hunter going from beyond the arc against Kansas State. So I would like to see more of that. Keep going with that free-flowing offense. More, Tarik, you mentioned looking more assertive. I think that needs to be a thing. Just stop playing so much ISO ball. I think that's the gist. But I would like to see ultimately Texas get further than they did in the postseason last year, still, because they still have the team to do it. So, Sweet 16, ultimately, if we end the year on a Sweet 16 berth, I'm considering that a success at this point.
I think I don't think you ever consider Sweet 16 failure, do you?
If you're like Kansas or Duke or UNC, Kentucky.
When I say consider, I'm talking about Texas, not.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Not Kentucky or Duke or something like that.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree. Okay. Recruiting. So it was maybe a week ago that Ron Holland and AJ Johnson reaffirmed their commitments to Texas. They are the 2 5-star signees from the 2023 recruiting class. They signed early back in November. And while, yes, they were locked in, one thing that can get you out of your letter of intent is the head coach departing, getting fired, whatever. That is something we can talk on here. If y'all think that, there might be more movement in the 2023 class, I don't really want to speculate on decisions of high school seniors, but do you think they might look to explore their options, or 2024 class? I guess ultimately what I'm looking for here is, do you think it's ultimately a good thing that we get to look forward now? And what happens with 2023?
So Paul Biancardi spoke with Ron Holland today, and Holland said, quote, "It's a punch in the gut. I'll sit down with my family and discuss everything."
Okay.
I would assume that, there's no reason to assume anything, but I think that this conversation between, Ron Holland and his family and his family about what's going to happen going forward with Chris Beard has been had over the past month. So I think it's a positive sign that within the last week, they reaffirmed their commitment, because even before today's news, I think they have to know that there's a good chance that Beard wasn't going to return as the head coach. That being said, I would not be surprised if either one of them backed off their pledge and looked elsewhere. It'd make a ton of sense. I think it's incredibly good on Rodney Terry if he keeps them around even through the next 2 or 3 months. I think if Rodney Terry, I know you're not going to keep harping on Terry, But I think the ways that he keeps his job, one of those ways is to keep Holland and Johnson committed through the next 2 or 3 months into the offseason and goes from there. I think that'd go a long way. But, I mean, their kids and their head recruiter, the guy they're going to play for, both of them, hopefully for 1 year, is now gone. So I wouldn't not be surprised if they take a look in the mirror and potentially back off this commitment. And if they do stay, I think that would say a ton about the program as a whole and kind of what Texas is building in basketball and kind of how they're viewed nationally as a brand. Because if they stay, it means they weren't just solely connected to Beard. So.
Yeah, I'll interject there. There was about 2 days ago that AJ Johnson tweeted. I had forgot about that. That he had tweeted that he loves what he's seeing from Rodney Terry and my guys on the, and that he can't wait to get to the 40 acres. So make of that what you will, but that's probably a good sign for now.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, it's hard to really know. I think they're going to certainly, even if they opened it up again, they're going to keep looking at Texas and see, like, well, what does Texas do as far as getting who is their next head coach going to be? And if you get a big name, I could see them certainly saying, okay, everything I wanted to do at Texas is still there for me to do. If you don't do that, then that's when you'll be in trouble. So, but regardless, this is something I want viewers to think about. You don't make the hire to keep these recruits. You make the hire for the next 5 to 10 years. So if it costs you for next year, it costs you for next year, but you have to make the right hire. And, you know, Shaka Smart was kind of kept on so that we could get, was it Brown?
Greg
five-star.
Greg Brown.
Yeah, Greg Brown. That obviously, you know, that wasn't the right call. They should have just moved on from Shaka earlier. And so let's not repeat that mistake. Though I don't think we'll have to worry about that because I think CDC, Jay Hartzell, Kevin Eltife, they want to go into the SEC with momentum. So I expect them to do that.
I would say it's also something to note that even if like this Beard situation didn't happen, there's a good chance Texas would have lost, 6, 7 of their 9 rotation guys this season. I mean, 4 of them in Marcus Carr, Timmy Allen, Christian Bitt, Serge Rice have exhausted eligibility. There's a chance that Tyrese Hunter would move on to the next level. Dylan Mitchell was hoping to move on to the next level. Morris possibly as well. The only guy in the rotation currently that, would probably stick around is Brock Cunningham for another year. So I think regardless, even if there's a ton of roster turnover in the offseason, I wouldn't solely attribute that to the loss of Beard because I think it was going to happen regardless. So whoever is hired is going to have to do, a quick job work transfer portal and hopefully keeping guys like Holland and Johnson committed because it's going to be a completely different roster next season.
I mean, yeah, a lot of it's going to have to do with how, like, the next head coach. Okay. I mean, a lot of it's just going to have to do with the next head coaching hire because, I mean, the fact of the matter is that a player like AJ Johnson doesn't fit every system. And similar thing could be said for Ron Holland. Holland's a little bit more versatile, but I'll conclude this, and this is a good transition point for us to talk about coaching candidates. So the big fish, if you will, for the 2024 cycle is Trey Johnson, number 1 recruit in the nation. Texas at one time had a lot of momentum with him. He's from Dallas Lake Highlands, and man, he is good. I mean, he's the number 1 recruit in the nation for a reason, but like, if you even want to pool together all number 1 recruits in the nation from the past decade, he's at least in the top half. So, I mean, you got a guy that, while I know this is a long time away, at the moment looks like a number 1 pick in the NBA draft. I guess at that point it would be 2025. But he's a guy that, while yes, I don't think Texas would make a head coaching hire based off just trying to land him, maybe an assistant coaching hire, but not a head coaching hire. This is where a guy like I wrote an article about this a moment ago, that John Calipari. I know that's a weird name to bring up at first. I do not think that that's going to be Texas's top target out of the gates. And I mean, he's got a lifetime contract right now at Kentucky, so who the hell knows if he wants to leave. But Kentucky is one of the top schools right now for Trey Johnson, so that could be a possible connection there, or at least something. I guess I will open up. You know what? Let's actually open up the coaching discussion on this. Who is one guy that each of y'all have maybe seen around in all these coaching candidate hot boards, or a name that comes to mind that you think that Texas just should avoid?
I've seen some that I would say, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Don't get your hopes up that that's going to happen. Would be more the kinds of things I've seen.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think avoid is an interesting term. I mean, you mentioned Calipari. It that would be the name that I'd throw out there. But at this point, I don't think there's anyone that I really want to completely avoid. I would say, if anything, avoid some names that aren't like needle movers. I mean, of course, so CDC has always gone after the biggest fish and been pretty successful in doing so. I think that this cycle will be no different. But I don't think there's any reason to, delve down into like a successful mid-major coach, because Texas has proven, I mean, Beard proved in the 18 months he was here that this program has top 5 potential. And with the new Moody Center, I mean, it's a sleeping giant. It recruits itself. It doesn't matter who the head coach is. There's going to be 4 and 5 stars that want to play at the University of Texas. So I think that, like, I had someone on Twitter today that I was engaging with that was saying, look at some assistant coaches around the country. I don't think that's the right move unless it's a Royal Ivy for the Nets. But I don't think there's really any avoidable names right now.
I'll throw out
I guess the avoidable name for me would be, and I need to figure out how I'm going to phrase. Okay. Unless he does something elite, I think Rodney Terry might be the name to avoid.
What?
Because it's going to be seen as kind of the lazy hire. It's like, okay, like that it was like, is because Terry's not going to turn you down, obviously, things like that, and he's not, he's got no skins on the wall. He's not going to really move the needle or anything. So if he hasn't led you somewhere already, then don't take that shot. That would be the one.
I think that's actually a great point, Tarik. And
not that I don't like him. It's just like, but if you're gonna do it, like I would be, if he makes the like Elite 8, Sweet 16, and you hire him, okay, because you've proven you can get this team somewhere. If you're getting knocked out in like the first or second game of the tournament, or if heaven forbid you miss the tournament, then no, don't do that. Go ahead, Shane.
So I agree with your first point, but I agree with your first point by disagreeing with your second point. If Terry coaches this team to a 14-4, 15-3 Big 12 record and proves over, like a 2-3 month sample size that he's a hell of a good coach and we see tremendous strides in, the 3 months he's at the helm, then all for it. Give him a fair shake. But say this team goes 10-8, 11-7, whatever, and ends up with a 6 seed and makes their first Sweet 16 in nearly a decade. I don't think 2 good games of basketball warrants giving Terry the job. Like, even though Texas hasn't reached a Sweet 16 in however long, or a Final Four since 2003. Obviously, if he cuts down the nets, or anything crazy like that, then it's a different story. But reaching a Sweet 16, I don't think you just hire the guy because of that. I think that would be a little nearsighted of a move, especially if the team went 10-8 in Big 12 play.
Oh, I was assuming if they made the Sweet 16, they'd also made a good run in the Big 12. So I agree with that.
Yeah. I think my whole point is that, like, I think Terry could win this job, but I don't want to see, like, okay, Texas hired Rodney Terry because of tournament result. I want it to be, like a 3-month build out type thing. He's kept momentum with Holland and Johnson, maybe picked up momentum in another recruitment. And it's not just, one weekend of basketball that Texas fans became enamored with.
Yeah. Rodney Terry is not the name that was coming to mind. There's actually another name that I was steering in the direction of, but I will say, I've said it before in the show. It's just Terry has a decade of coaching experience or head coaching experience in Division I college basketball. And I might have actually mentioned it earlier that he has not made any NCAA tournaments. That is actually incorrect. He did make one as a 14 seed at Fresno State, but he was at UTEP and Fresno State. Not the best programs in the world, but those are ones you can make it to the NCAA tournament if you've built a good enough program. And so I guess the point I'm trying to get at here is that his track record doesn't show me enough to the point where borderline short of a Final Four appearance for me, that's going to do enough for me to say, yeah, he has built up enough for me to be confident in him as the Texas head coach. So
that's why I was saying earlier, you got to make this decision for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
About who your next coach is going to be. I think the head coaching cycle that everyone who don't want to be in a situation where in 2 years you're again having to talk about hiring another coach. You need to make sure you get this hire right. You got it right with Beard, and then Beard, of his own free will, screwed that up. You got to do that again. Although the thing this time that's going to be different is Beard was a great hire, but in many ways Beard was also easy because Beard always wanted the Texas job. So when you needed a job, you already had a great coach who wanted it. You're going to have to probably pry someone this time. So it'll be a little more difficult.
I would say, Andrew, on the name that you're thinking of, and I guess a name I'd probably avoid. I'm curious if this is the same name. Bruce Pearl, at Auburn.
It is. It is not, but man, I'll agree with you on that.
So
no one seriously mentioned Bruce Pearl, did they?
I saw it. Tipton Edits, who actually is one of the bigger guys in the high school recruiting space. Yeah. He made a post on it, but it's so interesting because
CDC can resign if he hires Bruce Pearl.
Pearl made a Final Four 2 years ago, won the SEC last year, and it's like I mean, obviously, I think I wouldn't want him leading our program, but he's a winner.
I'll try to loop that back in here by saying, like, I don't think Dykes might be right for TCU. I don't think he was right for Texas. Jamie Dixon, I don't even know how right he is for TCU at this point. I mean, they've had good seasons. They got a formidable team this season, but I mean, Dykes has been, or not Dykes. God, Tark, you got my brain all scrambled. Dixon has been worse at TCU than he was at Pitt. And so I get part of that's probably just Big 12, the strength of the conference. But my point here is I've heard that name brought up a few different lists at this point. And I think it's just one because of the TCU connection. But that is one that I would generically like to avoid because for obvious reasons, I just don't think the ceiling would be all that high with him.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I haven't seen
I also
name,
don't.
I don't want that.
I also don't. I mean, I think you mentioned the Dallas Morning News did that, and CDC will. Of course, you'll if you're an athletic director, you'll look back to coaches you had before and think like, okay, could this work elsewhere? I mean, that's normal. But I think during the last coaching search for a head coach with when Sark was hired, the names that were being thrown around were people like Sark, James Franklin, and I forget Dan Mullen at Florida. So none of those were people that CDC had especially worked with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, except Franklin, they've been friends for a while.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. So, and also if y'all think back to April 2021 when Beard was hired, I believe that was April. Yeah. That Beard deal closed pretty fast. I mean, that was already during the off season, but man, Sarkisian.
We all knew if they fired Shock, it was going to be Beard because Beard wanted the job.
Yeah.
Just all you needed to do was get rid of Shaka, and it was done.
Yeah.
There was no good reason to do a search.
That's fair. Well, let's round things out here by giving. I'd say, I mean, if y'all have repeats, that's fine. We can each give maybe 2 or 3 names that piques our interest. I'll start, and I feel like I'm coming from a place of defending my choice, but I'll roll with it. I mentioned in my piece today Kelvin Sampson. I don't know. I mean, I think it's an interesting thought. He's obviously established one of the biggest winners of late in all of college hoops. So, and he's been recruiting at an extremely high level. He develops players very well. And to be frank with, a coach that's had past struggles as he has with scandals and stuff like that, I mean, he's kind of righted the ship and been able to connect with this generation of players almost, at least the connection-wise, almost seamlessly, it seems. And so I know there's other baggage to Kelvin Sampson, so I'm not going to try to defend that for too long. I just think he's a winner, and he's built one of the best programs of late in basket or college hoops. My other favorite names so far are, and this one of them's just a me thing too. I like Brian Odom at Utah State. I think that he's a possible under the radar candidate, depending on how Utah State finishes out the season. That's not going to move the needle for a lot of people, but maybe he would be someone that like a TCU would hire if they needed a new coach, but he's someone that I like. And then a really good one that I say would be the most realistic of the 3 is Nate Oates at Alabama. He's been quite good at every stop, and Alabama's a top 10 team right now. So, and he would, he's succeeding in the SEC, gives you something to go off of for the SEC transition. Those are my 3.
Yeah. I think Sampson is interesting. He's just 67. I don't know if he'd want to make that switch at this point. Far and away, my number one, whether it's shooting for the stars or not, is Jay Wright. You were able to somehow monkey Jay Wright out of retirement and get him to Austin. He has literally no connection to the state of Texas, University of Texas. He's a Northeast guy through and through, but there's a fit there with kind of the foundation that Texas is built on, and Wright's been the cream of the crop in the sport the past decade. So he is far and away my number one guy. If you could ask me who Texas could handpick, I would say Jay Wright. Other names I had, Tony Bennett from Virginia. I don't know how great the fit is there. After a down season, UVA seems like they're kind of figuring it out again. I don't think they'd let him leave. I think they'd kind of pony up, and I think he already makes about $5 million, but they'd give him an extra $1 million or $2 to stick around because what he's done for that program he's done wonders. I have Musselman and Oates on my list, 2 SEC guys. I think Oates is very possible. I think he's kind of the name that of these guys who, when I went through it, I'm mainly listing like Power 6 current head coaches. I said reasonable or not, you got to make these calls. I think Nate Oates of those guys is the most realistic. I think Musk could be a little bit too, but transfer portal king so far and recruiting king. But I feel like he's pretty ingrained with the Arkansas fan base. He's another guy that I don't think Fayetteville would let walk out pretty easily. I think they'd pony up some money. But I saw Mark Few getting thrown around. That would be an interesting name. I don't know why he would do that, but interesting. And you mentioned John Calipari. I would not be totally against that. And if you would have said this a month ago, it is completely unrealistic. But what has happened with Kentucky over the past month, there's almost kind of a mutual, like, we might want to go our set ways. The only thing with that is Texas kind of is going to get its fair share of 4 or 5 stars regardless. And Calipari hasn't been the best X's and O's guys over the past half decade. So,
Yeah, to say the least.
yeah. So I think Jay Wright by far at the top of my board. I have Oates and Musselman. I think Ed Cooley from Providence is an interesting name to look at too. But
Yeah. I guess I'll label it this way for me. Sampson is my controversial one. Odom is my very far under the radar one. And then Oates is the realistic one that I think people would like and could actually happen. But yeah. Tarik, who do you like?
Well, obviously, I think that your first phone call if you're CDC is you call Jay Wright and tell him that, I know that you really like broadcasting, but you need to be on the bench. You've had a year off. Come on, let Texas thaw you out, and let's win some more national championships. So he'd be my first call. So totally agree with the chain there. Second call is going to be Scott Drew at Baylor. Give him a blank check. And just keep backing up the Brinks trucks until, maybe this would be a great time to remind him that a representative of the state house was angry that if Texas left, they couldn't build their new stadium like they wanted. It's like, see, like we can get you everything you want, whereas you've kind of been living off of the money that might not be there as much when we leave. So that would be my second call. And then I don't dislike the Houston idea. I think he's a little too old, and you need more of where I could see him retiring in 5 years, and I want a coach that ideally is going to be here like 10 to 15 years. So, yeah, that I'm not sure about that one. And I mean, unless it's say Jay Wright, if you can get Jay Wright for 5 years, that's more than fine. So, and then Royal Ivey would be. I think he would be a really good head coach. So that would be my list.
Yeah, Royal Ivey is a good name to watch. Brooklyn Nets assistant.
I also think the thing that Texas will have to break a little bit. They didn't quite have to do this with Beard. Is there's kind of this unwritten rule that the basketball coach can't make more than the football coach at Texas. It's a merit-based business. If the basketball coach is more proven than the football coach, then absolutely he can make more money. So I mean, with what you just did with the Moody Center, all the things you're doing to really get basketball humming, go full throat and try and get a Drew or a Jay Wright, and then I don't think Royal Ivey is going to be turning you down, so you kind of have him in your back pocket. So I'd make those two the forefront and see, like, push really hard for them really soon, kick the tires, see if anything can progress there, and then if it can't, then kind of just turn to Royal Ivey after that. But you might as well just go out and get a championship winner. Even if it's a small % chance, remember everyone's got that number. So
yeah, I think that there might be some internal pressure to keep the ball rolling in regard to what the Mooney Center atmosphere has created, what Beard has kind of created, because you're not going backwards with a hire like Ivey or Odom, but you could lose some momentum that you've gained. So, of course, you want to make the right hire, but I think they're going to prioritize making a paper clippings worthy hire, really newsworthy guy. So Nate Oates does have a $10 million buyout, which is unfortunate. Not for me, but for the people having to pay that. The more you look through it, it seems like he'd make a lot of sense and is, like you said, Andrew, the most realistic option. But this is what
How much is Drew's buyout?
we look.
A lot.
Wait,
I'm gonna assume.
Wait, Baylor's private, so you might not even know.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's true.
what
Yeah,
about Andrew? I'll throw this one to you. I've seen it on some lists. Brad Underwood. Any interest?
No.
I mean, I'll say this is that Brad Underwood is a decent head coach.
No.
Mind you, if he doesn't like his situation, he'll leave in an instant. Brad Underwood, to some degree, gives me like Jimbo Fisher of college hoops vibes.
Yeah.
He makes weird moves sometimes. He can coach up a decent program, but I mean, there's been years at Illinois and Oklahoma State where like they definitely did not maximize what they had under Brad Underwood.
No.
So no, it's not my favorite. It's not the worst, but it's not my favorite if I'm just being objective.
Okay. Now that we've gotten that bad idea off the market.
Yeah, I'll say this. So yes, Shane, you make a good point. There's a lot that they've poured into this basketball program lately in terms of commitment to NIL for transfer portal and for recruiting. The Moody Center, I mean, and just generically the amount of resources that the athletic department has committed on social media to getting the basketball program where they want it to go. And so I don't think you want to lose a lot of this momentum, whatever that means for the head coaching hire. I think that, like you said, Shane, I think that means, and Tarik, you mentioned it too, that you want to bring in a big name and that it might not matter the cost, even if it costs more than a football coach.
I mean, I would anticipate if you're going to get like a Drew, a Wright, or any of those like elite coaches, you're going to be paying north of $9 million for a basketball coach, as far as salary.
Yeah.
Not to mention those buyouts, as you mentioned, Shane.
Well, right, you don't have any buyouts, so that would be good.
We're Texas, folks. It's Texas. We print our own money. This really is like the last thing to argue about.
Yeah.
It is. I will say this about Wright in particular, because it is interesting. I mean, I think he's very realistic? Probably not, but y'all mentioned it. You need to give him a call. Why not? He mentioned on air this year, because he's a broadcaster now. He mentioned on air this year that he misses coaching even less than he thought he would since the season started. On the other hand, Texas is probably one of those programs that one can give him enough money and two can give him enough resources that would actually pique his interest. So I think it is definitely worth the call. He's not going to pick up the phone for just any program. So keep that in mind too. The last name that I will toss out there that I think I haven't mentioned it yet, and I probably will eventually, so I just want to get this in, is Tommy Lloyd at Arizona. I think that is a name to watch. I think he's done enough this year at Arizona so far to say that he's worth a look.
If you can hire Tommy Lloyd, I think you do it tomorrow. But I don't see any reason why he'd want to leave. I mean, he's 46-5 as a head coach. Like that's ridiculous. Like that is honestly insane. Everything we've seen from a season and a half. If Tommy Lloyd would sign up to be the next men's basketball coach at Texas, I would scrap all the. Obviously, I'd prefer Jay Wright. I prefer Scott Drew. But if Tommy Lloyd wants a job, I think he's going to get it. I mean, that would be awesome. I would be thrilled with that hire.
He's been on enough short lists for me at this point from some of the bigger outlets that if he.
Yeah, I've seen that too, and I'm like, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
Because Arizona is like a pretty prestigious basketball program, and
I wonder if there's still enough stuff hanging over that program to make them to make them consider other options still. Also,
yeah,
he's making like $3 million a year.
Yeah, I saw someone tweet out, which very fair. It could have been you, Tart. I forget who, but you're going to see a lot of head coaches in college basketball get raises over the next couple months, and that's just kind of the Texas effect of an opening. So
Yeah.
he's one that I think Arizona would be very dumb to not pony up everything they got for him.
They already handed him an extension and a raise last year.
Yeah.
But they weren't willing to go that high. I don't know. I think between the lack of increase in pay at Arizona compared to what he might want after this season, that is based on speculation, educated guess from his extension last offseason. And maybe some of the stuff hanging over the program. Again, this is just off stuff I've read, that maybe that's enough to at least get him to hear out what Texas could offer. I mean, hell, let's say this, because I'll leave it on this. If you're talking to a coach like Tommy Lloyd, he's making $3 million a year after the extension. I don't know. I know there's some pretty lucrative bonuses in there that can boost his yearly salary up as much as $700,000 to $1 million for the next couple of years, but that's still not a ton compared to what he could get elsewhere. Let's say you sit down, you're Texas, you're like, okay, $7 million a year with some lucrative bonuses, room for extension, unlimited resources for the program, no scandal hanging over it at all. You more than double his salary. You give him even more resources to work with. Nothing hanging over the program. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think too, the Pac-12, especially with USC and UCLA leaving, is going to start to become more irrelevant. And I mean, already right now this year they're probably a 4 or 5 bid league, so not very deep. You kind of get lost in the shuffle. Not very many, especially once January 1st hits. You're not getting a ton of games that people are tuning into on the East Coast. So yeah, that's another thing. But yeah, that would be an awesome hire. That'd be a home run.
I'm not trying to talk myself fully into it. I'm just saying that when you start reading into it, it starts making a little bit more sense. Not a ton, but a little bit more. So, I mean, okay, we're just in under an hour at this point. There's going to be certain points in this video where I was rambling, but I'll try to cut down on it. But I think we packed plenty of content in here.
Right on.
Yeah. We were actually planning on doing more of like a football position by position focus for the show today. I will try to get back to that here before too long, because we've got more action coming up on the portal here before the January 18th window closes. So
maybe we should just wait until after the portal's closed to do that show.
You think? Just not missing names. All right. That's fair. Anyway, yeah.
So, I mean, school starts for Texas on Monday, and then, which is also the title game, and then there may be some players on those teams who may be jumping in the portal, so it'll be fun last week and a half for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think hopefully we have more positive stuff to talk about on Saturday on the site after. Hopefully, I will say this. I know that this sounds facetious coming from me. I do actually hope that we beat Oklahoma State, because I think this program has a higher ceiling this season, and I'm tired of watching Oklahoma State ruin someone's day and then go and lose 10 straight. That's hyperbole, but
kind of like in football this year.
Yeah, Oklahoma State's a party ruiner, and now I feel bad for football because Oklahoma State football is.
We could have went into the bye week. We could have went into the bye week, bowl eligible, and having just beat a top 10 team.
Yeah.
Boom.
But anyway, yeah. So Oklahoma State on Saturday. Hopefully, we come out of that 2-1 in conference play, and feeling better about the Terry situation. Hopefully, the defense. But for Andrew Miller, Tarik LaCour, Shane Black, from Headlines, that is pretty much it. Welcome.